It may be said that, as all human societies have the right to order the circumstances in which their particular act shall be performed, the Church possesses this common right and may appoint the circumstance of instrumental music as an accompaniment to its peculiar act of singing praise. How this relieves the difficulty is impossible to see, for the confession defines the circumstances in question to be common to human actions, and therefore common to the actions of all human societies. But it will not be contended that the action of singing praise in the worship of God belongs to all societies as such. If that action does not belong to them, no circumstances attending it can belong to them. The community of the action infers the community of the circumstances attending it. The ground of the objection is therefore swept away. There is no such action common to all societies as the singing of praise in God's worship, and consequently no such circumstance attending it as instrumental music. The action and the circumstance vanish together. If the action of singing praise belonged alike to the Church and all societies, there might be some color of plausibility in the plea that the Church may determine the circumstances which attend it as done by herself, so far at least as the terms of this particular clause in the Confession of Faith are concerned. If, however, the action of singing praise in God's worship is peculiar to the Church as a particular kind of society, the circumstance of instrumental music as attending it cannot be common to human actions and societies. It is therefore ruled out by the language of the confession. This argument is conclusive, unless it can be shown that instrumental music is a circumstance necessary to the performance of the action, singing of praise. A simple and complete answer to this is that for 1,000 years the Church sang praise without instrumental accompaniment. How then can its necessity to the singing of praise be maintained? Can a circumstance be necessary to the performance of an act when the act has been performed without it, and is now continually, Sabbath after Sabbath, performed without it? To say that instrumental music assists in the performance of the act is to shift the issue. The question is not, is it helpful, but is it necessary? To this it must be added that this particular provision of the confession is to be interpreted in conformity with its Catholic teaching and that of its sister standards. Both represent the singing of psalms as prescribed. Both are silent about the prescription of instrumental music. Now, if it could be proven that the latter is necessary to the former, the prescription of one would logically imply the prescription of the other. But we have seen that there is no such necessity. We are obliged therefore to exclude instrumental music as illegitimate in view of the express declaration of the confession and other standards that we are forbidden to introduce anything into the worship of God which is not prescribed. Here is a circumstance which is neither necessary nor prescribed. It cannot, therefore, be among the circumstances legitimated by the confession. We have now seen that the action of singing praise in the worship of God is one peculiar to the Church and not common to it with all other societies, and that instrumental music is a circumstance concerning this peculiar ecclesiastical action which, therefore, cannot be common to human actions and societies. Consequently, it is not one of those actions which are in the discretionary power of the Church, precisely as they are in the discretionary power of all societies. No circumstance peculiar to and distinctive of the Church, as such, can be one of the circumstances mentioned by the Confession of Faith. The question then returns, what are the circumstances concerning the worship of God which the Church has the right to order according to the light of nature and Christian prudence? Their proper definition is that they are conditions upon which the actions of all human societies are performed, conditions without which the actions of any society either cannot be performed at all or cannot be performed decently and in order. First, they are conditions which are not peculiar to the acts of any particular society, but common to the acts of all societies. They cannot, consequently, be peculiar to the acts of the Church as a particular society. But instrumental music is a condition peculiar to the act of singing praise in some particular churches. The conclusion is obvious. Let us take, for example, the circumstance of time and place. They condition the meeting and therefore the acts of every society. None could meet and act without the appointment of a time and a place for the assembly. This is true alike of the Church and an infidel club. In this respect, they are dependent upon the same conditions. Neither could meet and act without complying with this condition. This is a specimen of the confession's circumstances, which are common to human actions and societies. It is ridiculous to say that instrumental music is in such a category. It cannot be overlooked, as has just been intimated, that instrumental music is a circumstance which is not common to even particular churches. Some have it, and some do not. How can it be common to all societies when it is not common to churches themselves? How can the conclusion be avoided that it is not one of the circumstances designated by the Confession of Faith? Secondly, the circumstances indicated by the Confession are not parts of the acts of societies. They simply condition the performance of the acts. They are in no sense qualities or modes of the acts. If the proof of this position is required, it is found in the simple consideration that some, at least of the acts of various societies, are different acts. They are not common between them. It is therefore obvious that the parts of those acts fall into the category of the acts of which they are parts. But these circumstances are common to the acts of all societies. To recur to the example of time and place, these, it is needless to say, while necessary conditions of the acts of all societies, are from the nature of the case parts of the acts of none. The resolutions adopted by any society surely do not embrace in them time and place as integral elements or qualities or modes. But instrumental music, although sometimes employed in churches by itself as a distinct act, in which case it stands confessed as not prescribed and forbidden, is generally used along with singing as a part of the act of church worship. In these cases it certainly qualifies or modifies the act, as therefore it enters as an element into the acts of the church as a distinctive society, and does not into the acts of all societies. It is ruled out by that fact from the class of circumstances indicated by the Confession. Thirdly, these circumstances are conditions of actions as they are actions, and not as they are these or those particular kinds of actions. They condition all sorts of actions of all sorts of societies. The debates and votes of a secular, deliberative body are as much conditioned by them as the prayers and praises of the church. It will scarcely be contended that instrumental music is a circumstance which conditions the debates and votes of a legislature or of a political meeting. But if not, it is conceded to be excluded from these circumstances which are pronounced by the Confession common to human actions and societies. Fourthly, these circumstances are conditions necessary to the actions of all societies, necessary either to the performance of the actions or to the decorous performance. Let it be observed that they are necessary not to the performance or the decorous performance of some peculiar actions of particular societies, but to all the actions of all societies. To take the ground that instrumental music is a circumstance in some way, a necessary condition of the singing of praise in church worship, is to go outside of those circumstances which the Confession of Faith contemplates. A condition of this peculiar action of the church, however necessary to the performance of the action its employers may deem it, cannot possibly be a common condition of human actions and societies. It lies outside of that class, and therefore outside of the circumstances which the Confession has in view. Instrumental music is palpably such a condition, and cannot be justified by an appeal to this section of the Confession. Fifthly, these circumstances, as conditions upon which the acts of societies are to be done, cannot be religious in their character. The reason is perfectly plain. They condition the acts of all secular societies, and it would be out of the question to say that they proceed upon religious conditions. But instrumental music, when employed in the worship of God's house, is religious. Hence the plea for organs that they have a solemn sound, and are on that account peculiarly adapted to accompany the singing of praise as a religious act. If it be said that they are a secular accompaniment of religious worship, it may well be asked, by what right is such an accompaniment to the worship of God employed without a distinct warrant from him? And when the organ is played without the accompaniment of the singing of praise, is it then secular or religious? If secular, will it be justified on the ground that secular music may, by itself, be allowed in God's house, and that he may be worshipped in a worldly manner? If religious, the question is given up, and then we are compelled to return to the assertion that the Church has no discretion in appointing religious elements. They are not among the circumstances which are common to human actions and societies.